welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. Today I've got my long-awaited lockdown book review for you. I'm going to go through the 5 books that I've read so far through lockdown, and I'm currently on the 6th as well, which I'll tell you a little bit about at the end. But yeah, I know that some of you guys have been waiting for me to go through the books that I've been reading, but honestly I've only read 5 in like the 9 weeks that we've been in lockdown. And I think that's mainly down to like the first few weeks I was just finding it really hard to concentrate on a book. I think with everything that's been going on, I know a few people have found it quite hard to read, even though at the beginning I was like, oh, it's fine because I will just read for the whole time that this is happening and I can't wait for it. And then actually when I ever sat down to read, I found it quite hard to concentrate. And then I was given like a couple of books by people who were like, oh, this is a really easy read, like you don't have to concentrate on it too hard. But actually they were the ones I found the hardest to get through because they weren't very gripping. So some of the ones that have been the best that I've read during this time have been quite dramatic and thrilling books. So actually I've decided that those are more the ones that I need to stick to. I know a lot of people have been asking for just like really simple stories to get through. I think I might be the opposite end of that spectrum. So yeah, I've got 5 books to talk through. I don't have all of them with me because a few of them I have borrowed from other people, just to save money basically at the moment. We've just been swapping books, me, my friends, the woman that I work for as well. She has a fantastic like selection of books for me to choose from, so I've been very, very fortunate. But yeah, so let's get into the reviews. So I have my little notebook down here. The first book that I read was Little Fires Everywhere, which I feel like has had a massive hype around it since it came out, and especially since recently the TV show has come out on Amazon Prime as well. That's not something that I've watched. I actually don't have Amazon Prime, so I don't think I'll be able to watch it, but I'm definitely intrigued to know whether it's good or not. I've heard some good things so far. But yeah, on to the book. So I did really enjoy this book. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. As you may know if you've watched my book reviews before, I don't tend to read too many contemporary or modern books, but it is something that I'm trying to change because obviously there's been some fantastic books that have been released recently. So this is one of the ones that has actually like turned my head towards contemporary books. I didn't think that I was going to enjoy it that much, but I really, really did, and I really enjoyed the storyline. As a bit of an overall, it's about 2 families basically living in this very sort of like American, almost like this synthetic town that's been created. I believe it's a real town in America, and obviously America itself isn't a very old country, so a lot of the buildings there and the towns there have been built there within the last 400 years. So it's quite like this new town. Everything's perfect. There's rules you have to stick to if you live there. All the residents know the ins and outs of what everyone's business is. And this mother and daughter come to rent one of the houses there. And originally, like, they don't really fit in. They're quite poor. They sort of are nomadic in the sense that they just travel from town to town. They don't like to stay in one place for too long, and it just goes through the connections that are made between the mother and daughter unit and one of the families, like one of the biggest profile families in the town, that have quite a reputation in the town. And it's very clever. I really enjoyed the connections that were made between the 2 families. I liked the amount of backstory that was brought up during the book and how well thought out it was, because that it could have actually been quite disappointing and anticlimactic, but it wasn't at all. And you basically find out that the mother and daughter, there's a story as to why there's not a father, and I don't want to give away too much obviously, but there's like a big background to that. And then the youngest daughter of the quite reputable family feels a very strong connection to the other mother, and she almost starts to feel like she could be her daughter, and that she pretends to be her daughter. She doesn't really get on with the family members in her own family. They're not like her at all, and she feels quite left out, and she is quite left out actually by all of the family members that are part of her family. And it's just really interesting. I've just liked the connections between the different family members, and just some of my notes were that basically the clever links all were really well thought out and well rounded. An interesting theme of class, because the big family is very rich and the mother and daughter unit are poor. And it talks about abortions, and the abortion storyline that's in it, I did put that it is slightly cliche, but it was written very well and very sensitively, which I appreciated. The story, without giving too much away, is one of the daughters gets pregnant by her boyfriend and chooses to have an abortion, and it's written very well. It wasn't done in an insensitive way. It was talked about fully, which I really appreciated, and how that is like a last resort, but one that should be, I believe, offered to people who feel that they would not be able to give a baby a better life. So it was well written about, and it made sense to have it in the story. I've talked about this a lot before, where there are traumatic themes in books that have no link to anything else in the story, and I sometimes feel like they're purely put in there to just stir up emotion, but the only emotion that makes me feel is anger, because it's a lot of the time they've been written insensitively. But this was different, and I appreciate that. But yeah, overall I definitely would recommend reading this book if you need something that's easy to read but still is a page turner. Then this would be a really good one for you right now. Okay, the next book I wanted to talk about is a bit of a curveball. I don't think I would have read this if the woman that I work for hadn't have given it to me, because I would never have even come across it, I don't think. It's quite an old book, and it's called A Far Cry from Kensington by Muriel Spark. It's written in first person, almost like a diary, but not in diary entry form. And it's just almost like a gossip book about all these things that happen in her house. And actually I found it quite relatable, in the sense that the lady who speaks throughout the story, she lives in like a converted Victorian house in London, which is kind of what me and Sophie live in Brighton. We live in one of the Victorian villas that's been converted into flats, and this is what that woman lives in, and just all the gossip that goes on, and like, oh, who did this in the hallway and blah blah blah. And I just found that quite relatable, and it was very funny. It's a really, really good book. It covers a lot of themes. There's relationships and friendships. It covers suicide as well. Not in a very in-depth way at all though, but it's there. It wasn't written badly. It was just, it wasn't like a main theme running through the book, but it's in there. And just lots of, I guess, feminism, but not, I don't think she meant to write it that way, but it does cover themes such as that. For my notes, I just put that it was very witty and funny, a pleasant read. I enjoyed the gossip style of the story, and I was interested in the characters, but you didn't need to be too invested. And again, I think this would be a really nice one to read during lockdown, because it's very funny, it lifts your mood. You're interested in the characters, but you don't have to really commit to them to understand what's going on in the book. It's one of those books where you can just read it and enjoy it, and if you don't remember it afterwards, it doesn't matter too much. So I would really recommend this book. It's just literally about this one woman and all the little things that happen to her, and it's just quite funny. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one, but like I said, I don't think I would have read it if my boss hadn't have given it to me. So it was nice to read something that was out of my comfort zone. Okay, the next one I do have in physical form. I borrowed this from my friend Becky, and I absolutely loved this book. It's Winter by Annie Smith. I know a few of you may have read this because it's a very popular book, and it's actually part of a seasonal series. The other 3 books are obviously summer, spring and autumn. I don't believe they're connected in any way. I think the name of the book is just the season in which that particular story is set, but they're not linked in any way. So it's a series, but the characters are not the same in any of the books. But obviously this particular story is set in winter, and it's actually set over Christmas. I adored this book. I thought it was beautiful. It's very poetically written. If you enjoy poetry, then you'll like this a lot. But if you don't enjoy poetry, I think you would still like this, because it is written as a novel, but poetry does play a big part during the book. But it's written in such a way that even if you didn't like poetry, you would be able to completely understand what's going on. So I don't think that would affect anyone's reading experience of it. One thing to note, there's no speech marks in this book. It's one of those. I still don't know how I feel about books that just don't have speech marks when someone is talking. I actually find it so frustrating, but I understand why authors sometimes use that technique, and I find that often it's in books where the characters are not blendable, but that I think the author is trying to portray the fact that they are constantly merging or talking over each other, and I feel that that's why there's not speech marks. It's to make that more apparent. I might be wrong, but that's what I take from it, and I believe that that's why that technique was used in this book, because a lot of the time all the characters are in one room and they're talking to each other, at each other, over each other. There's a lot of arguments in here. But yeah, it was so interesting, and it's about an elderly woman called Sophia, and the first chapter actually starts with her being followed by this severed head, and you don't know if it's a boy or a girl. It's childlike but genderless basically, and it follows her around her house. I believe it's a metaphor for her mental health, which was rapidly deteriorating throughout the book, but that's how it starts. And it was the first book that I read during lockdown that really captured my attention, and I wanted to pick up the book and read it. And I mean, if the chapter starts with a decapitated head following you, that's gonna get my attention. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, and the book just goes on following Sophia, and you find out about her sister Iris, and there's flashbacks to their childhood or their teenager era, and reasons why they do and don't get on. You see a background to their relationship, which is really interesting. And then she has a son called Art, who is going out with this girl called Charlotte, but they have a massive argument before Christmas, and Art is supposed to visit Sophia on Christmas Day, and he told her that he'd bring Charlotte, but obviously they break up, and he's too scared to tell her that they've broken up, so he actually hires a girl that he finds by a bus stop to be Charlotte for the weekend, and he's like, I'll pay, I think he pays her £1,000 or something ridiculous to pretend to be his girlfriend for Christmas. And it's really interesting because while they're there, and I don't think this is a spoiler particularly, but while they're there, they find out that the girl isn't Charlotte. And something I noted in the book is during the time that they're all here for Christmas, Sophia addresses the girl in 3 different ways, depending on her mental state, which I found really clever. So the girl's name is actually Lux. And when she finds out that Lux isn't Charlotte, she still calls her Charlotte for quite a long period of time, even after that has been revealed, almost as if she can't process it. Then she starts calling her Lux, but then a couple of times they have a few arguments, and then she's just noted as she in the book. She said, she did, she this, she that, and she doesn't have a name. And then when they make up again, she's back to Charlotte, and then sometimes she's Lux again, and it was like very dependent on where Sophia's mental health was, which I thought was very clever. It's funny because obviously that's my interpretation of it. I don't know if that's what the author meant by it, but that's how I interpreted it, and I just found that really interesting. There were a few themes running throughout this book. Like I said, mental health being a big one, talks about panic attacks and stuff like that as well, and I just put, what should I write for this one? Basically everything I've already said. Yeah, I've mentioned all of those things, but I did put a few tabs in this book. I should have written the pages down before starting filming. Where are they? So there was just a few things that I put little tabs by that I found really like prominent, that stood out to me. So this is the first one. He will wish he'd got up from behind the screen he was looking at and crossed the room and just hugged her whenever she told him that dream. Just a hug right then would have been better than the nothing he did, the worse than nothing he did, the despising her because she felt something, because she tried to give words, give it an image. I liked that paragraph because it resonated with me for reasons that probably I won't go into now, but I just thought it was very interesting because basically that scene is his girlfriend is crying and she's trying to explain why she's crying and why she's upset. She's trying to give it words and an image, like the paragraph says, and he just sits there and doesn't do anything. And I don't know, that paragraph really just stood out to me. Like, he will wish that he got up from behind the screen he was looking at, because he's looking at his laptop, and crossed the room and just hugged her whenever she told him that dream. Just a hug right then would have been better than the nothing that he did, the worse than nothing that he did, because he despised her for some, sorry, my reading's awful when I read out loud. The despising her because she felt something, because she tried to give it words, give it an image. And I don't know, just really hit me. I just like little things like that. Another one, this is a funny one that I noted, was this paragraph. Where should I start? The literature doctor, she says, the man who wrote the dictionary, Johnson, not Boris, the opposite of Boris, a man interested in the meanings of words, not one whose interests leave words meaningless. And I just thought that was really funny because she's talking about the guy who wrote the dictionary, whose surname is Johnson, and she says, like, oh, his name's Johnson, but not Boris, he's the opposite of Boris, a man interested in the meanings of words, not one whose interests leave words meaningless. I just really enjoyed that too, so I noted that one down. I thought that was very funny. And then the other one, oh, this is a little funny one as well, but it's between Iris, Sophia's sister, and Lux, and she is talking to Art the next morning about what they were talking about. I said to your aunt last night, she says, after you came out here when you were asleep, I said, art is seeing things. And your aunt said, that's a great description of what art is. And what she really means is Art, the son, is seeing things because he was having hallucinations. And the aunt says, that's a great description of what art is, as in art like you would put on a wall. An art is seeing things. There was just lots of little paragraphs like that throughout this book that I just thought were very funny, but in a very, like, that's quite poetical. Poetical, that's not a word. That's quite poetic. And I just really enjoyed it. I just thought it was a really beautiful book. I should probably stop talking about it now. But yeah, definitely like 10 out of 10. I really recommend any of you reading that. It was just really beautiful. Okay, the next book I read I don't have with me, but it was Expectations by Anna Hope. This one has had a lot of hype as well, and I know lots of people have been talking about it recently. I did really enjoy it, and I recommend it if you like a book that just sort of goes along and isn't too deep or complex. But for me, I found it slightly disappointing. It's about 3 women who have been friends since university, and it follows them growing up into their 30s basically, and it follows them having children and getting married and relationships or not having relationships and not having children, and just all the themes that run along parallel to those things. And I did enjoy it, but I just felt like the characters were quite static. I didn't see much development through them. I actually thought a lot of them were kind of arses. Like I was just thinking the whole time, why are you even still friends, because you're all horrid. And like some of the guys that they were married to were just really like just arseholes, and like a lot of the time I was just reading it like, I don't care that your friendship isn't going well, because actually I don't think you should be friends anyway. I think I was supposed to be the opposite of that. I think you're supposed to read it wanting them to stay friends. But actually, when things started to fall apart, I was like, good, because you're all really toxic to each other. So perhaps I didn't pick up on that story how it should have been, but that's how I felt about it. But yeah, it had themes of love, grief, pregnancy, friendship, relationships, cheating, and like the reality of life, basically. But yeah, I felt the characters were really simple. They weren't very complex. They didn't have much personality. They had a lack of substance, and each character revolved solely around their main theme, and it didn't expand much beyond that. And what I mean by that is, like, Lissa, one of the girls, her main theme, I would say, was independence, perhaps, and basically her whole storyline revolved around the fact that she doesn't need anybody and she's not going to have kids, and that was who she was, which is obviously fine. I relate to that a lot myself, but I just don't think it should have just been all that she was about. You can have other interests than just that. And then one of the other friend, Hannah, her whole theme was going through IVF with her husband and how much she wanted a baby, and her husband kind of wasn't really into it. I don't think he really cared about having children at all. And she was just very like, just like so set on having babies, but with someone who she obviously hadn't really had a conversation with before getting married about whether they actually wanted to have children. She kind of annoyed me, but obviously I completely understand that some people will go through IVF to have children, and that's not the part I'm annoyed about. I was more annoyed about her character and how she reacted around those things, but maybe I was supposed to be annoyed at her, so I don't know. But like, yeah, it was very just like, this is what this girl is about, and that's all she can be about. Because then the other friend was about how she'd met this guy. Within 3 months she got pregnant with his baby, so they got married, and then they'd had this baby, and she had postnatal depression. And that's all she had in her life, was postnatal depression, which is obviously a really important topic to be talked about. And I'm not disputing that at all, but it was not expanded on. It was talked about in quite a cliche way, I'd say, and it was just very, very monotone. The whole book was very monotone. There was no expansion, there was no development. This is what the women were. They couldn't be anything else outside that box that the author had put them in, and I just felt it was a bit flat. And that's not disputing that those topics aren't important, because they 100% are, but the book did not give those topics just. I felt like it was like, let's talk about loneliness, let's talk about pregnancy, let's talk about postnatal depression, but not actually go anywhere with the three themes. And it just stayed that way until the end of the book, and none of them really learnt a lesson. I certainly didn't learn a lesson from it. I kind of disliked all of them by the end of the book, and yeah, I just found it a bit disappointing. I think it could have expanded on such important topics. This is like this is a qualm that I have with a lot of books, that they just throw stuff in to be like, yeah, it's a book that talked about a really important topic. Yeah, it talks about it, but it doesn't go anywhere with it. It doesn't actually bring any awareness to it, so then it's pointless. You could have gone somewhere completely different. Anyway, that was my thoughts on that one. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't enjoy it either. And it definitely took me the longest to read, because I just could not be bothered to pick it up. But anyway, on to the next, which is one that I do still have. This one I borrowed off Sophie, who I live with, so very lucky to be able to borrow all of these books. This is My Sister the Serial Killer. I loved this book. I think I read it in about 2.5 days. I mean, it's not long, but I just whizzed through this. Absolutely incredible. Again, actually very simple, a very simple concept, just very cleverly written. And I think that that's the difference here, that you can have a very simple concept, but if you write about it brilliantly, then you're good to go. So a few of the things that I noted in this book: it managed to balance comedy with the sinister side very well. It was constantly on the edge of both, which is very true. It constantly had you on the fence of laughing and almost liking the sisters, but also remembering that they are killing people. And you were sort of on this precipice of the two. But it was very well done. It was a bit like Killing Eve, because obviously when I watched Killing Eve and I'm just like, oh, Villanelle, she's so cool, and then I'm like, she's a mass murderer, like, calm yourself. It's that thing where they're very witty, they're very charismatic, all the classic things that these people tend to be, but you fall for them and you know you shouldn't. And this was what the sister was like in this book. She was very, you didn't like her, but you did like her. Yeah, it's a very well thought out story. Each murder had a meaning, which was really important to me. Even the murders that happened before we joined the story, I felt connected to. So when you start the book, I think she's on her 3rd murder. So even the ones that aren't mentioned in the book, the ones that she had previously done, you felt like the author just made it so possible to feel connected to those two. Like, you weren't just dropped in the middle of the story. It started further on, but you still felt like you had been there for the others. It was just very well written in that sense. There was an interesting to and fro between Ayoola and Khalid. I don't know how to pronounce their names, but that's what I went with when I was reading it. Perfect take on sisterhood and the pull and push between love and hate. And you check your own morals throughout the book as you love and dislike the characters evenly. And that's something that I found carried on with me throughout the whole book. And something else to mention is the chapters are so short. I think the longest chapter was 6 pages. So it's very quick pace. Something's happening, something's happening, something's happening. It's very like, you can't put it down. It's brilliant. It's just so well written. I highly recommend it. All the hype was for something. It's just very funny, but very sinister. So if you like anything like that, then I feel like this would be a fantastic book for you. Okay guys, so that's all the books that I've read so far during lockdown. I'm currently reading To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This is part of my strive to read some more classics that I haven't got round to reading yet. I really want to buy some more Thomas Hardy books, but I'm trying not to do that because Thomas Hardy is my favourite author, as we all know by now. But I'm trying to like expand on that. Although saying that, I am going to collect my Jane Austen box set books off my mum at some point when it is safe to do so, because I want to read all of the Jane Austen books again. But anyway, thinking outside the box on the classics, I've gone with To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I've actually owned this book probably since I was a teenager and I've just never got around to reading it. It's, funnily enough, my mum's most hated book. She absolutely despises it. I think that's mainly because she read it in school though, which is the reason why I hate Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, because I read it in school, and I think if you read a book in school, it just makes you hate it instantly. So I think that might be part of the reason, but then she did say that she reread it when she was an adult and she still disliked it. But I have to tell you, so far, I'm only 4 chapters in and I absolutely love it. I think it's brilliantly written. I can't remember when it's actually written. I know it was a long time ago. I want to say like the 50s, but it's set in 1930s America in like the deep south. I think it's set in near Alabama, and it's about these 2 kids and just what they get up to. But then I think later on a big accusation is made against a black man that he raped a white woman, and it's about like the justice of that and how he was like wrongly accused. I'm gonna guess that the children have something to do with standing up for him or something. I actually don't know the rest of the story, obviously, because I haven't read it yet, and I haven't gone too far into looking up like a like expanded blurb or anything, because I kind of don't want to know. I'm excited to just read this without knowing anything about it, so that's all I do know about it. But yeah, so far I'm just really enjoying it. It's really funny. It is like written in dialect. They do have southern drawl accents, but it's pretty easy to read still. It's not putting me off too much. And yeah, I'm just really enjoying it so far. So obviously you will get a full review of that once I've finished reading it. And I'm hoping that my thoughts on it so far don't change, because obviously I have this little cloud in my head that my mum hates it, but so far I am really enjoying it. So I'd love to know what you guys are reading as well. Do you go put it down in the comments. I am so interested in what you guys are reading right now. I love to hear about it. Let's have a little chat down there, keep each other company, and don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Do subscribe if you want to see more videos from me, and head over to rayofstyle.co.uk for more blog posts. And I will see you in the future, guys. Look after yourselves, stay safe, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.